I'm good. I got his waters right here for the show. Dan Jensen, welcome to the Pirate.
Hey, thanks. Is it going?
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. So you just got back from your second hitch in Bethel.
Yeah.
How'd that go?
It went well. Yeah. It's the second 2 weeks stint out there. The first time out was kind of a training month or so. So I was out there for just short of a month.
Yeah.
Getting all spooled up and then on the line. And then this was kind of my first straight 2 weeks out there.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's Bethel.
So let's start off with your qualifications.
Sure.
You are...
So I'm a commercial pilot. I've got a multi-engine rating and CFI as well.
Nice. And double I, MEI?
Just the initial CFI.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
And so you built time as a CFI and with your own 172, right?
Exactly. Yeah. Pretty fortunate to share 172 with my partner Jess, and I was able to build a lot of time in that plane.
Nice. And where did you do your initial training?
My PPL I did in Taos, New Mexico.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then
moved up to Anchorage and went through instrument, through multi and CFI over the next kind of 12 months of moving to Alaska. Kind of moved up here, got a job, saved up money, and then just went for the rest of the ratings pretty much as fast as I could go. I was pretty fortunate to get some help with some grants through the state, as the state recognizes aviation as an industry here. So that helped pay for a couple of my ratings, and
nice.
Yeah, worked out.
So moving up here and finishing your flight school afforded you the opportunity to log Alaska time, which is missing from a lot of low-time pilots.
Yeah. I moved up with maybe 125 hours or something like that, as a private pilot. And I need to add up my logbook now, but I'm somewhere around 1,000 hours.
Oh, sick, dude. Sounds like you logged more than one since I've seen you last.
Yeah, it's been a lot of flying.
Hell yeah. So talk us through Bethel, what that's like. Some of our listeners may not be familiar with the hitch work and how that functions.
Yeah, so Bethel is kind of this notorious place amongst Alaskan pilots, I guess you could say. It's Western Alaska. Bethel itself is a pretty big airport. I think it's a 6,000-foot runway. There's jets going in and out of there, and a beehive of 207s and caravans and some Navajos. It's kind of Wild West flying. You're servicing a lot of these villages that runway conditions aren't always the best. Weather is pretty consistently terrible. Very strong winds, low clouds, a lot of icing. My first shifts have been kind of going into winter, which is a challenging time to fly out there. There's really not one flight where you're not encountering some icing or some crosswinds that kind of make you think twice, or all the above.
Are the runways frozen right now, or are they in freeze thaw?
Everything's pretty well frozen right now.
Yeah.
We're doing recurrent training right now, and the owner was talking about his son going out ice fishing on just one of the lakes out there. And if you look on a map, it's probably more water than land from Bethel moving west out towards the Bering Sea. But he had to drill through 12 inches of ice to actually get to water. So everything's very frozen over right now, including the runways.
Yeah. Looking at the map, remember, before we moved up here, I couldn't believe how much of the land was just little pockets of water.
Yeah, it's all water. It's crazy. I make a joke, or was chatting with Jess, my girlfriend, about Lord of the Rings when they're walking through the black swamp.
Yeah,
there's all the faces in the water. Like, that's very much Bethel.
Yeah, that's pretty much what it looks like. Even the town, they're like little.
Yeah, everything's built on stilts, and there's no below ground plumbing, and it's a wild place.
That is That was pretty shocking when I first went there. Like the houses, if you're in a nice enough house, it's on stilts. If you're in one of the cheaper houses, it's just set up on cinder blocks
Yeah.
and it sways with the cars passing in the wind.
Yeah.
And then all the plumbing is external and insulated in these massive pipes.
Yeah. It's just kind of all these 2-foot conduits running everywhere to every building.
Yeah.
Yeah. I've never seen anything like it. It's a really unique place.
Yeah.
For sure.
And so what Bethel does is it serves as a distribution hub. It's a cold water port, and so it gets some stuff in during the summer, and then the rest of the stuff comes in on Alaska Airlines, and it gets distributed with the smaller planes.
Exactly. Yeah, I think there's Alaska, NAC, Everts. There's some of the bigger carriers that bring stuff out, and then smaller planes kind of disseminate that to the rest of the villages, which is cool. My first shift, I went to 32 different villages.
Nice.
And really got to see a lot of places that otherwise, I would have never gone.
Yeah,
So
it's wild. And the villages may have 100 or 200 people. There's not many people
right.
per village. There are no roads, so everything is. This time of year, you actually have more options because you can run a snow machine in.
Yeah. There's kind of the ice roads right now. So there's kind of the 3 tundra villages just west of Bethel, and between kind of the frozen tundra, the lakes, and some of the rivers there, they somehow figure out a way to kind of drive in on their snow machines. But it's all, yeah.
The rest of it's just flown in.
Pretty much everything just kind of flown in, which when you go to the grocery store and look at the price of everything, it kind of makes sense.
Yeah.
Logistics and getting the can of beans there or whatever it is.
And that's just Bethel. Then to see the prices out in the actual villages.
Right.
Because in Bethel, you're just paying for the flights it took to get up to Anchorage and then over to Bethel. And then from there, you're paying for an extra flight on a small, much less efficient airplane.
Yeah, by the time it gets to Bethel, it still has its longest, slowest flight to go.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. So, what were the differences that you noticed coming from Arizona, flying up here?
New Mexico?
One of those
one of those, right?
throwaway states.
There's so many differences, but then also so many similarities. Biggest difference would be I learned to fly with a pretty high density altitude, being in New Mexico, northern New Mexico in Taos. Airport elevation was 7,100 feet or so.
Oh, geez.
And in the summertime, you'd have a density altitude, it's 9,000.
Jeez.
And learned to fly in a Cherokee 140.
Oh, yeah. So those are known for their power.
Yeah, so it wasn't the most efficient. But I guess it was great because it really showed you when you were uncoordinated or something like that, where you wouldn't get your 150 foot per minute climb rate, you might only get 75. So I think maybe that lent itself to kind of picking up stick and rudder skills a little quicker because it kind of necessitated that with those density altitudes. Maybe not, I don't know. But mountainous terrain, very similar to here. Wild weather. I think Alaska weather is a little crazier, but it was very variable in northern New Mexico as well. But yeah, a lot of similarities and a lot of differences. I don't know, the airports, there's a lot more strips up here.
Yeah.
So you kind of have more options.
Mm-hmm.
Should things go south, it was kind of a little bit more sparse down there, but then you still kind of have a lot more roads down there. There's a lot less roads. I don't know. So it's just different, but very similar.
Yeah. And what about the move from Anchorage to Bethel flying? What were the biggest differences you noticed there?
Oh, that, as crazy as it sounds, that was probably the biggest shock and change coming from flying just around the Anchorage Bowl. To going out there, I realized how much of a fair weather flyer I was.
Yeah.
And a 207 is a lot more capable than a 172, but your kind of comfort zone rapidly expands when you're subjected to the weather in Bethel on a regular basis. And now we're flying today, and you're going to be flying for up to 8 hours, and just mentally will be exhausted by the end of it.
Oh yeah. The little decisions that you have to make constantly, back to back to back to back to back, and those
Yeah.
are you're making them first of all with imperfect data,
Mm-hmm.
and a lot of them are really high consequence decisions. You know, they're not always life and death, but you know, some of
A
them
lot
are.
more, yeah.
And so it's just like the mental exhaustion from doing that over and over again.
Right.
It's pretty intense.
Yeah, and then, CFI, you're obviously with a student, but flying a 135 game, you might have 6 people in the back of your plane now.
Yeah.
And that's another variable that kind of changes, especially when you are going through those decisions like you're talking about, where, it's not just cruising from here to Palmer and, oh, it was a little bumpy, but, it's like, no, we're taking someone 2.5 hours out to the Bering Sea at night. It's snowing and there's no weather reporting stations within 100 miles. So,
Yep.
it's just it's kind of another level out there.
Yeah. Yeah, that's up real quick.
It really does.
So how has it gone for you so far out there? Have you had any sticky situations?
I've had some learning experiences for sure.
Any you care to share?
I've learned a lot about reading weather, how fast it can change,
Yeah.
how quickly ice will accumulate. When, and these were not forecasted icing conditions. It's not foreseen, but things happen. And you really kind of can take for granted, like, oh, I'm on the ground here. I can see Bethel right there. We'll be in the air for 7 minutes.
Yeah.
Like, okay, like, I think we can make it. We'll get a special in.
Mm.
And next thing you know, you have a silver dollar size hole through your windshield that isn't iced up, and that's all you got. And you can just kind of see it packing on your strut, and you're in a hold because someone's coming on an instrument plan, and now that 7-minute flight turned into something that could be potentially life or death because you're at 400 feet, you're picking up ice, you can't see.
Yeah.
You're not sure when you're going to get cleared into the delta, and like, oh, I can't really go back because it's getting worse where I took off from. And poor decisions just can really, really, really stack up quick. So it's really trying to minimize those before you get off the ground, or as you're getting your manifest, just kind of like, let's take a look at this in an hour. You don't necessarily have to say no right away, but
Right.
they'll push you, and that's kind of any, I think of. You've probably had similar experience working in 135 operations where
Oh yeah.
like planes don't make money on the ground.
No.
And someone who's been flying out there for 30 years, their kind of tolerance and I guess ultimately abilities
Mm-hmm.
aren't your abilities, and just trying to really keep all that in perspective all the time is really challenging.
And their understanding of different options. So like,
Right.
somebody with experience might understand that, hey, look, if I go this way, it's going to be if I go leeward of this hill, there aren't any hills up in Bethel, but like they might know ways to avoid the dangerous parts.
Right.
The weather is something we've talked about quite a bit on this podcast. And, you go through the weather courses in ground training and in any 141 bachelor's or associate's program, but in the downstates, it never really matters. You get your briefing, and like the briefing tells you what the weather's going to be, and that's like 80% of the information that you need, 90% sometimes. Like you don't need much more.
Right.
But you come out here, like you're talking about, sometimes it's 100 miles to the nearest weather station. Sometimes, like we've been dealing with in down toward Port Ellsworth and on the peninsula, most of the weather cams and a lot of the weather reporting stations are out of service right now.
Right.
So the points of data are few and far between. So it pays to know how weather moves and how it shifts with the daylight, how it shifts with the winds.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I think the books and videos and things like that are great for kind of building some foundational understanding, but I think the knowledge is really gained through the experience.
Oh yeah.
Being out in that weather, and especially it's nice being out there for 2 weeks straight because you can, you know, as a pilot, 50% of your time is probably spent looking at weather, and 5% of the time is actually flying, kind of thing.
Yeah.
So really, really studying that weather every day, and then flying in it and seeing how it interacts. And like Bethel does get a reputation of, oh, everything's flat out there, and for the most part, it is until you go to the places where it's not flat.
Yeah.
And learning how that crazy weather in the flat area is even crazier once you do get into the mountains. They're not huge, but you know, you go from sea level to 3, 4, 5,000 feet. You know, it's doing a lot. The weather's doing a lot of weird things in there that it might not necessarily be doing out in kind of the tundra flats. But,
yeah, and it's had all of that room on over the flat part to either pick up moisture in the summer or to just be unobstructed, and it's not part of your consideration during the flight over the flat parts. And then you get into the hills, and even if they're small, it's causing some serious issues right away.
Most definitely. Yeah, it can get really spooky quick, especially once you throw some mountains in the mix.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What's that? And I meant to put the map up here. That one hill out in the southwest, it's like right on the right in the southwest corner. There's one hill, it's like 100 feet high or something like that. And they're like
southwest corner, like southwest of Bethel?
Yeah, southwest of Bethel.
Like out towards like Kipnik area?
I can't remember now. But there's like 3 planes that are stuffed into that one hill because...
Oh, okay. That might be down towards Mukdavik or Newtalk.
It might be close to Newtalk.
Yeah. So that's where like things really stack up quick. The weather is usually terrible there.
Yeah.
There is some mountain. So you have like Newtalk and then backside of it Night Mute, and there's definitely some mountains in there. And crazy winds, everything's frozen over, low visibility, and you're kind of landing on these runways that are kind of built like halfway up mountainside kind of things, or like right at the base of mountains, and depending on what the winds are doing, you're like crazy downdrafts coming in. So yeah, that's where it's like, if you look at it on paper, like, oh, it's like 1,000 feet, or oh, it's 100 feet or 500 feet or whatever it is. Like, it's kind of like just enough to make it really challenging all the time.
And those mountains aren't lit, so at night, you know.
No, it's so dark out there.
Yeah. And there's, unlike flying in the States, like I loved flying at night in the States because you get up, you know, 7,500 feet or whatever, and, you know, you've just got this like checkerboard of, on the East Coast is where I did all of my night flying. It's just a checkerboard of little cities and towns and stuff like that. So you always have an up and down. You may not have a real horizon, but you've got like that's down.
Yeah.
And it's not like that in the flatter parts of Alaska.
No, and sometimes it's like it's like full instrument flying.
Yep.
That was one of my first days on the line. I was dispatched out to Kipnik and Shafornik, leaving at like 4 p.m.
Nice.
I thought this is going to be a night flight. And like the weather was pretty good by Bethel standards, and there was kind of that dead zone where you can't really. There's nothing reported, so you're hopping on windy. You know, you're looking, trying to gather as much information as you can, and then kind of setting those like, well, if this happens, I'll turn back. Yeah, that kind of thing. So I dropped the 2 guys off, and I'm cruising back to Bethel, and kind of one of those nights where we're talking about where it's pitch black, you can't see a thing, and then it starts snowing.
Yeah,
and you know, like you go through your ratings and they talk about the spatial disorientations and things like that. And this was my first time actually experiencing one in real life, when I kind of made the mistake of watching the snow because it looked cool. And then next thing I know, I'm looking at my instruments and I'm 30 degrees off my heading. I'm in a bank turn, I'm climbing, and the disorientation, it took probably 30 seconds to just get the wings level like maintain your altitude, get back on course, but everything's wanting you to keep turning,
Yeah.
and you're fighting it like this, thinking that you're just turning more. And so I kept on my nav lights and my strobe, but I turned off my headlights and
Yeah.
kind of put my head down and just it was an instrument flight from there on.
Yeah.
If I looked out, it was like instantly getting that weird lean kind of disorientation. But that was a good lesson learned. It was those dark nights like that, and when you throw a little snow in it, it's wild.
Yeah, because like the snow is just coming from the relative velocity is pretty much just into the airplane. And so it doesn't give you any sort of a perception of your turn, no matter how you're maneuvering, everything looks like you're going into hyperspace.
Yeah.
And so like it doesn't matter how you turn the airplane.
Yeah, it just looks nuts. Oh.
Yeah. I remember one of my first times, Jesus, dude, this scares me. One of my first times flying to Navajo at night, I was with a phenomenal instructor, one of the highest time pilots I've ever met, Magnus Nilsson. And he would let you experience and like give you enough rope to hang yourself, basically. Mm-hmm. And I took off out of New Exit, and I was climbing out, and I said, "What's that star right there?" And I was like pointing up. He goes, "That's not a star. That's a light on the ground." And I had like taken off, and then when I was head down doing something, I pitched the nose back down and was descending from like 400 feet.
Oh.
And I was like, yeah. So we got it straightened out real quick. He saw the whole, like, he was watching the whole thing and was like, wasn't going to let anything bad happen, but it was a real wake-up call. Like, hey, this is, I need to be on it. I need to be paying attention that I'm at a positive rate, that I've got wings level, that, I'm away from the ground before I divide my attention whatsoever.
Right.
So, you instructed for a while. You're still doing that on the side, or?
Yeah, I still instruct on the side a little bit.
So what's that like?
Instructing is a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Like selfishly, it helps kind of keep me sharp on not only kind of the maneuvers and just controlling an aircraft, but the rules and regulations and what you can and can't do.
Yeah.
And it's really fun just trying to figure out all the ways to like impart the knowledge on the student and kind of have those little breakthroughs like you've had all along your career. And then seeing the successes, like before my last shift, it was a student landed a plane for the first time.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. And it's just awesome to be a part of that. Like the smile on their face, and you can kind of put yourself back to like your first landing. And he was so psyched. Like he got all flustered and was like trying to do flat. I was like, just taxi off and enjoy it, man. We don't need to touch and go on this one.
That's awesome.
But yeah, no, and I really enjoy instructing and kind of being in that sort of atmosphere. Like ultimately, I'd love to be a DPE.
Yeah.
I think that'd be a really cool job. Kind of for that same reason, that not necessarily be on like the teaching side, even though I do think you can learn a lot from DPEs.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's like legal to say or not.
No, DPEs never teach.
Right. They never teach. But just kind of that, like being there for those successes and that, those times in people's aviation career would be a cool gig. And CFI certainly gives you glimpses of that.
For those who aren't familiar, CFI is Certified Flight Instructor, so the teachers of flying, and DPE is Designated Pilot Examiner, so that they're employees of they're not employees of the FAA, but
I thought they were contractors of the FAA.
Yeah, something like that. They're paid directly by the student, but they are affiliated directly with the FAA, and so they put you through a check ride and hold you to the standards, airman certification standards. Those are publicly available, and they go through and they check off stuff or mark X's on stuff as you go, and that's how you either become a pilot or you don't.
Yeah.
So, where do you see yourself in the next few years? Do you like the 135 world? Do you have bigger aspirations?
That's a great question. Jess and I talk about that a lot. Being in a relationship with another pilot, it's cool to kind of always be like comparing notes and like figuring out what it is you want to do. And it's nice that she's a lot further along in her piloting career than myself, so I can kind of try to follow in her footsteps somewhat.
Yeah.
But I kind of got into aviation initially through intrigue about fighting fires. There was really bad wildfires in Taos, and they called them super scoopers, and helicopters were on the ramp, and it's like, wow, that was pretty cool. So that's kind of why I started lessons, and that was kind of, and still is the ultimate goal. I would love to fly the super scooper.
Yeah.
But that's kind of one of those super high time, really specific resume kind of gigs. So I've got years and years before I can even start thinking about that. So, I've never really had dreams or aspirations at all to go to the airlines or do anything like that. It just really has no appeal to me.
Yeah.
I love flying, and that's why I think I really dig the 135 world.
Yeah.
Is you're flying a lot, and you might get 17 to 25 landings in a day and go to all these places, and like you're flying a ton, and it's a really good time. So I think I'm just going to kind of ride that cycle as long as it lasts, and I think this spring I'll get my float rating and
nice.
Maybe try to find something that allows me to fly floats, because I think that would be. Never heard anyone say anything negative about flying floats.
It's always so thick.
Yeah,
it's so much.
That's what everyone's saying.
Do you have your tail wheel?
No, I didn't finish my tail wheel.
Oh, dude, yeah, it's a long, drawn-out process.
That's like a whole other story.
Oh, no,
I thought I was going to get signed off, and then it just.
Man, I had trouble with mine too. It did not come naturally to me, and I think the guy was just like, you're probably not going to crash. And then I didn't. I came extremely close a few times, but in
it's kind of part of it.
240 hours before I was really like getting the landings.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I have 240 hours
of tail wheel time.
Yeah, and so by the end of it, I was doing pretty fair, I guess.
Nice.
Haven't flown it in a while, but that was a lot of fun.
Yeah,
I recommend that.
Yeah, that's tail wheel and floats are kind of probably the next two ratings.
Yeah.
Maybe double I. I mean, I don't know, but
yeah.
Float flying seems like a lot of fun. So
yeah.
I guess that's a long-winded way of saying I really enjoy flying, and I'm just going to probably keep trying to find fun flying jobs.
There's so much of it up here in Alaska.
Yeah.
Have you looked at? Are there other operators that you really admire, like Alaska Seaplanes or something, Talkeetna Air Taxi, or anything where you're like, man, in 1,000 hours?
Oh, okay. Regal Air was kind of one like that for me.
Yeah.
Just flew for Regal Air doing bear tours.
Yeah.
I know most of the guys that work there, and would call them friends. And it's a really, really solid group over there. Really cool flying. Really good pilots. I think I would learn a ton and have a really good time doing it. I don't know, some of the operators that have otters on float planes, that kind of stuff could be pretty cool.
I just had Chris Hardis in here.
Oh, really?
Yeah, dude. He's got 7 beavers now. Sorry, not otters.
Beavers.
Yeah.
Fortunately, I don't fit in a beaver.
Really?
My femurs are too long.
Yeah, they're big, lanky.
Yeah, I don't. Yeah, this combo doesn't work in a beaver.
That's unfortunate. Man.
Yeah, I don't like the ubiquitous Alaska plane, but yeah, maybe otters.
Yeah. Who's running otters right now? Alaska's, right? Alaska.
K2, Katmai, Talkeetna Air Taxi.
Nice.
Yeah, they throw them on skis and go in on and on. Have a great friend that I would say in a lot of ways was kind of a mentor to me, kind of getting through my ratings, and was someone that I would chat with frequently.
Yeah.
She has flown for K2 for a number of years, and Been pretty lucky to go up with her and go land on the glacier.
Dude, that's
It's like the coolest job.
Yeah, no joke.
Yeah.
Like, I get to see him from close up, but I've never landed on a glacier. Like, that seems so badass.
Yeah.
And like everybody you're taking is psyched. It's not like you're taking somebody out on a business trip and he doesn't want to be out there and he got called in because there's an emergency out there and he's not psyched. And, you know, you've got like 6 people with stories like that and the whole mood's grim. It's like, dude, everybody that's landing on a glacier today is excited to land on a freaking glacier.
Yeah, exactly. Like my first time up here, I was working in the tourism industry.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's everyone's like bucket list trip. So even if you're having a bad day, it's really easy to kind of ride their psyche.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, I'm bummed about whatever, but like, these people have been saving for this trip for 25 years and look, the mountains out today, and like kind of puts it all in perspective.
Oh yeah, that's one thing I keep coming back to. Like I'll be like, oh, this is so bad. I'm like 3 hours behind schedule, and like you know, I didn't even want to fly this airplane.
Behind schedule,
Listen, safe. And then I'll be like flying along, and I'll be like, oh wait. This is badass. Like,
yeah.
I'm up here. I can see thousands of peaks, literally thousands of peaks from, 11,000 feet. And it's like, yeah, it's wild.
Yeah.
It's so gorgeous.
And you're getting paid to do it.
Yeah. Somebody's paying.
Pretty cool.
Yeah. So I had this question submitted recently. I actually answered yes to it myself, which was, did you try to fly in some dumb way when you were a little kid? So like when I was a little kid, I got my roller skates and a robe and a yardstick and tried to roller skate downhill and fly with
Oh.
Did you?
Interesting.
Did you try to jump off the roof or with an umbrella or anything?
No, I don't think I did anything like that.
No?
No. I'm trying to think. My brother was the one that was psyched on flying. I was kind of averse to it. Yeah.
So did you have aviators in your family growing up?
Yes, my brother, he was 17. He got his PPL and bought a quarter share of a 68 172.
Nice.
5811 Romeo. Is that
Yeah.
plane? Yeah, and so he was like hot and heavy. He wanted to fly. I think he wanted to go to like the Air Force or do something.
Yeah.
And I kind of hated flying. Like, we
Really?
would go on trips, and I would get like super sick.
Yeah.
I was like, I don't like this one bit.
Yeah.
And yeah, I was like never really into it until for whatever reason, like I was saying, when we saw the Super Scoopers, I was like, I'm gonna give this another shot.
Hell yeah.
But yeah, no, I was never like super into it as a kid. Just kind of changed later in life. I don't know.
That's wild.
Yeah, and now, like, my brother, he doesn't fly anymore.
Really?
He keeps talking about wanting to, like, get his medical card and come back up and fly. And
Yeah.
come on, man, we got a plane. I'll sign you off.
Has he flown up here?
No,
No. Oh, dude.
no, he's
You
flown
got
around
up here.
like Southeast Ohio, Indiana area.
Nice. So
So-
it's been to Sporties?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I think he flew into Sporties one day, and that was like,
I checked that box one.
right,
Yeah.
yeah.
I did a super sketchy touch and go in my tail wheel on the grass strip there.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I was like, whoa. I'm glad this is grass.
Yeah, yeah, it's forgiving.
Do you have a call sign?
Do I have a call sign?
Yeah.
No, I don't know if I've been in the game long enough to have a
No,
call
you
sign.
didn't have one like in training or anything?
No, I went to like a pretty grassroots kind of mom and pop Part 61 school. It wasn't like a
What was your training?
91.
What was your training like? You said Part 61, so it was kind of all do it yourself?
Yeah, for the most part, I had my first instructor who, after every check ride I go through, I give him a call and thank him again because I learned so much from this guy. United pilot for a number of years.
Yeah.
However
Wow.
many tens of 20s of thousands of hours, I don't know, but just an amazing pilot. And really met the student where they were, I think, and kind of realized how much that student was putting in versus not putting in, and kind of really tailored the education like to that student. I was trying super hard, so I think he really tried to hold me to a high standard. And I can remember on like my second flight with him, I was supposed to study something. I can't even remember what it was, and he asked me a question, and we had like just taken off, maybe in the air for like 3 minutes. Asked me this question, and like I didn't know the answer, and he was like, "My controls." He's like, "You're not going to waste my time. I'm not going to waste yours. Clearly, you didn't study, and you're not ready for this flight. We're going to return. You can study, and when you have this, we can come." And it was like, oh my gosh, and it was like super impactful. Of you get out what you put in this, and if you're not studying your butt off, especially early on, where everything is new,
Dude, yeah.
and there's lifetimes of things that can be learned in aviation. And he knew the goals and aspirations I had, and it's like, hey, this effort isn't going to cut it.
Yeah.
So either get with the program or stop wasting my time, kind of thing. So he was an amazing instructor. And then one of the other instructors at that school, I started flying with her. She's a pretty great person too. Awesome instructor. We got along really well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is there any advice that someone's given you along the way in aviation that really stuck with you?
I would say most recent.
Yeah.
I think there's been a ton of things along the way, like that little story with Michael telling me, you're not going to waste my time if you're not going to study. Like, that was super impactful. But in terms of advice, most recently going out to Bethel and kind of taking on the challenge of flying out there. I was lucky enough to do some work with Birch Creek Flight School, and the owner of that school, Vance.
He's come up here a couple of times. I mean, he's come up on the podcast.
Oh yeah, Vance is awesome.
Yeah, great.
And he's got decades of Bethel experience.
Yeah.
So it's hard to pick any just kind of like one thing that he maybe said. We sat down for an hour and a half, and he was just kind of telling me all these things. But I guess ultimately, really knowing when to say no is huge. And it's really easy to get caught up in the like, I think we can make this happen. And like, as soon as you start trying to rationalize stuff like that, it's good to like take a step back and like, is it worth it?
Mm-hmm.
And Vance was great, and it's like, if you ever have that question, the answer is no, it's not worth it. And if someone's telling you to go, tell them the keys are in the plane, you can take it. And it's like, I think about that a lot, just about every day when you're like looking at the weather, and it's, oh geez, again.
Mm-hmm.
Like, and some days you can, some days you can't. And that's like 30 plus not crosswinds. Like, some days you can do it, and some days it's like, no, this just isn't my day for that. So yeah, really knowing when to say no, and whatever that is for you, like, internalize that and then hold yourself to those conditions. So
how did you come up with where that line is at first? Because one thing that I struggled with was I didn't know when to say. I didn't know what I would be capable of. I didn't know, what my limitations, as far as what I could actually do would be.
Yeah, that's kind of the crux, right? 'Cause what's that old cliche? There's no growth in comfort, and there's no comfort in growth.
Oh yeah.
So ultimately, you do kind of have to push the line a little bit here and there. Mm-hmm. And I was flying pretty fair weather around the Anchorage Bowl for however many hundreds of hours up here, kind of building time like a lot of people do.
Yeah.
And then you go out, and all of a sudden it's like, oh, it's gusting 19 across the runway. Mm-hmm. And when you're used to just like going out and tooling around, there's like 10 knot winds. You're like, oh, it's kind of windy today. And then you go out and it's like, no, this is like actual winds. Where you're just like, oh. I think I was pretty lucky for the first 25 hours, with 135. You're doing kind of training flights and flying with people. Mm-hmm. And I was lucky to fly with someone who's a lot of Bethel time, really experienced, and like flown in Iraq, and he's done all these things. And
Oh, wow.
we had just about every weather possible in that 25 days. So everything from getting a special back into Bethel at 500 feet to, pushing a 33 knot crosswind, which was like my record ever. And was like, I don't want to do this. And it's like, I'm here. If it goes south, like just try. You can always go around, kind of thing.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think you can try to roll the dice and like push the envelope when you're solo at times, maybe, but I think it's great when you can be with someone that has more experience and not necessarily use them as a crutch, but just kind of have that backup. So
yeah,
it doesn't go on your record for long deployment or something. But so just kind of knowing the times to push it and not, and that's obviously the name of the game. But like we were talking earlier, when you're so mentally drained, like maybe that's not the time to push it into this weather that you're unsure of, or fly a weight that you're not sure you can handle, or something like that.
Right.
Yeah.
The times that I've been like really scared after the fact, but the times where I was like, it's the end of a 14-hour day, 7.9 hours of flying, and shooting down the minimums or something like that. And it's like, there are times where it's like that's the job, that's what's happening today. And it's like you got to realize well ahead of time and be like, hey, what can I do to mitigate other potential factors? Like how can I make this the safest possible? Because like that is just an elevated risk compared to what I'd prefer to be flying.
Yeah, most definitely. There's so many uncontrollable variables in flying that you have to eliminate all the variables that you do have control of, like mental faculties, saying no to weather conditions, or turning down that last flight at 7.4 hours when, like, okay, yeah, I'm 91 back, but
oh yeah,
I'm at 40% capacity right now, and this flight would require 100%.
Yeah, and it's at the end of the day when the weather's, it's dark, probably, and like probably ice, probably snow. Like you got some freezing fog pushing in, depending on where you are. So and the weather conditions that you've been dealing with all day aren't necessarily what you're dealing with right at the end of the day.
Exactly.
Pretty quickly.
Yeah.
So you've got the 172 right now.
Yeah.
Do you have like a dream plane?
206.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Set up big bush wheels.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. We'll see how the float rating goes, but it would be cool to have on 850s and then have some floats too.
Dude, that would be so.
206 is just. I don't know if I've really like caught the tail wheel bug. Like I'm not like I want to fly tail wheels. Like they're cool, but 206 can haul a ton.
Yeah.
Can take all your friends. Can get in and out of small places. Pretty cheap to operate in terms of fuel and things like that.
Yep.
Injected, so you're not worrying about carb ice. I've had some carb ice scares.
Oh yeah.
I don't know. They seem like a really good plane to have up here.
Yeah. A lot sportier than a sled.
Yeah.
Yeah. All the power, none of the weight.
Yeah. Yeah. The sled's kind of a school bus.
Yeah. Dan Jensen.
John Golgaski.
Thanks for coming on the podcast.
Thanks for having me.